So, I've been taking some notes. And I don't really have a typical place where I put these. So, the plan is to experiment with something like this. Or at least to kind of, while I try to figure this stuff out. Hopefully within like 20 minutes. But, yeah. This largely kind of stems from me... Well, no, I saw a post on Blue Sky that was like somebody asking for game recommendations. Like they wanted something that was cozy and kind of mind off. And it made me think about the types of games that I tend to like more. Like, it took me a second to realize, oh, I don't really have any mind-off games. Like, I think I brought it up on stream before, where it's just like, I really like very engaging games. I like, not necessarily like super mechanically demanding, nothing like, why am I forgetting? Steel Battalion. Like Steel Battalion where it had the, like the command center controller that you could get for the original Xbox, which costs like $300 something just to play the game. And you can only use it for that game. But then I thought, no, I do like somewhat mindless activities. I like playing Granblue, and there's a lot of kind of... I don't want to say downtime, but there's a lot of grinding in Granblue where you don't really need to do much. It's more so kind of like an efficiency check, similar to, I would say, something like Satisfactory, where it's more about, okay, I gotta set up my team, I gotta make sure that this is all optimal, and that this can work in a full auto setup, and that it reduces the grind time down as much as possible. For a non-Granblue example, there's like Final Fantasy XII, because you can... I don't want to say like you can full auto Final Fantasy XII, but like the Gambit system, where it's just like, yeah, you set parameters, and then you kind of just go through the game. I don't want to say that you kind of just press forward and the game plays itself, because the gameplay is you setting up those gambits, and so that you can make that work. And then I've also been doing a lot of grinding in that. Like, I've been... not mind off, but I did set up like a couple of gambits so that I could focus on like efficiently grinding. But then I think I came to a point where I realized that I can't say it's like mechanically focused, because a lot of these gacha games and a lot of the cozy games kind of are very like, no, they do have a lot of mechanics. They do a lot of... they have a lot of different things to kind of like focus on, to pay attention to. But that's different from what I kind of categorized as high engagement and low engagement. Whereas high engagement is something very active, something very immediate. I'm gonna keep using it as an example because like it keeps coming to mind. Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal is a very high engagement game where you very much have to engage with the systems. You need to use the flame belch, you need to use glory kills, you need to use your chainsaw when you run out of ammo. Like, it is still like a very flow state type of game. It's not a flow chart where it's just like, oh, I see green and then I press the A button, or I see red and then I press the B button. It's very free-flowing, but it's still, like, you have to be engaged while playing it. Whereas something very low engagement would be something much more in the, I would say, like, cozy and kind of chill game genre, where it is a very mind-off type of experience, where you don't really need to engage with it. And that's not to say that games like that are bad. I think I incorrectly made the comparison that auto chess was very low engagement, but part of that stems from my lack of knowledge when it comes to auto chess. Low engagement would be something like, okay, I think about this like very simple setup or this loadout, and then I press auto and then the game like plays itself, or something that doesn't really require conscious active thought while in the middle of playing it. Something like, again, kind of like FF12 either in combat, or something like Granblue when you're just making a full auto team, where the game largely does kind of play itself, but you're setting up a lot of the units, you're giving them their weapons. Basically, a lot of the AFK kind of gachas in mobile games fall under that, which I'm very mixed about. I saw a very good video recently that was talking about, oh, I'm gonna be upset if I don't remember the name, but I'll look for it while speaking. It was talking about hostile design, and I don't think hostile design, the architect of games, my apologies. The architect of games talking about hostile game design, or that climbing games are fun because they're not fun, which I don't fully agree with the title. I believe hostile design is something very different. I would consider something like Pathologic 2's Town and its design to be active hostile design, whereas the design is deliberately getting in your way, very intentionally. But no, that push and pull creates engagement. You need to work for your reward. It's not something that is spoon-fed to you. It's not something that very easily comes to you. It's something that you have to meet halfway, or it's like you have to engage with it in order to get that satisfaction for completion or for mastery. And I think that's where a lot of that kind of comes from. Because I'm gonna bring it up because, yeah, you can't talk about games in difficulty without sometimes eventually mentioning Dark Souls. I'm surprised they made it 8 minutes in before doing that. But but Dark Souls is not a difficult game. It's obtuse. Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, 3 they kind of get easier about, but by the time that Bloodborne kind of came around, a lot more people became acclimated to how those games function. So it's not so much that they were really difficult, they were just very obtuse in the way that they displayed information and how things were presented to the players. I wouldn't even necessarily say that Dark Souls has very hostile design. I say, well, multiple flashbacks of getting ambushed kind of like come to mind. But there's a difference. There's kind of a... part of this comes from also that discussion of like, oh, if you play this co-op, or oh, if you use the Mimic Tier, then you're not really playing the game. That's not true. It is a tool that it is a tool that the developers gave you. It is a tool that the game has given you and that you have access to. You're not cheating by using the tools that the game provides to you. It is born from like this very kind of obtuse mentality where like, oh, this is the hard game for like the real hardcore gamers. It's not, no casuals allowed. When that's not really true. Like, a lot of people keep making this very incorrect assumption that RPGs are just grind fest because you need to grind in order to beat bosses and stuff. Whereas that's kind of just them engaging with the game badly. Like, sure, you can just grind to get powerful enough to steamroll a boss, but at the same time, maybe you could consider that there's some mechanics that you're overlooking, and that's kind of the same thing with Dark Souls, where, yeah, you can just grind to get stronger and grind up the souls that you need, and dump it all into strength, and then hit the thing with your big sword. Whereas, at least in my experience when I was really doing a dex build for Bloodborne, a lot of that was mastery over the boss fights. Like, I had to recognize, okay, I can go in, I can attack here for this long, and then I have to make sure I have enough stamina to get out, and to be safe, and to respond to what the boss is going to do next. Which is a form of boss design that I just really enjoy. I like when, like, there's active thought, there's something that I have to engage with. When a boss doesn't necessarily have very obvious tells all the time, but I can learn those, I can figure it out. One of my favorite memories is genuinely going through the KH3 Remine bosses, the data org battles. Like, that was just a really fun experience. Like, those were 13, 14 very different bosses that all had their own mechanics, that all had their own different moments when they were vulnerable. You also had to keep in mind the revenge value, but then, like, okay, during the certain moves I have to respond this way, or in certain moves, even if I can't respond this way because of the way that I'm playing, then I need to do something else to figure out a way around. Eventually, this line of thought kind of led me to, like, mastery. It's game mastery, which I feel has kind of dissipated over the years. Not like entirely, and it's not entirely, but like in kind of where we are now, the only real people that you end up seeing like very focused on single player mastery are either people that do very specific types of challenge runs as YouTube content, or speedrunners. Like, it's a mastery skill. It is, I'm going to dedicate this amount of time to this game to learn these things to execute at this specific level. And I think a lot of people are much more, I don't want to say accommodating, but I think their mentality is, when it comes to mastery, is that it's like, what's the point if I'm not showing it off to people? Which is why you tend to find a lot of very competitive people in multiplayer games. Like, oh, I'm putting time into this, this is a social activity, I need to perform to show off and be competent to other people. Or if I'm not competent, then I'm dragging my team down. Or like even in co-op games, where something like Peak or Night Rain, or Repo or Lethal Company, like, you don't really have to be masterful at them, but the types of people that choose to be masterful at them, a lot of it is... I want to word this correctly so I don't say anything that makes somebody mad. I think it's indicative of two kind of different things, where I would say that that type of skill and dedication is honestly better suited for a single player game. Like, cause I was playing Bayonetta recently. You can see that in the stream pods on the channel. Like and subscribe. But like, something like Bayonetta is very different from something like Zenless Zone Zero. Whereas Zenless, a lot of that mastery kind of comes from progression. I would say gachas kind of separate mastery and progression, whereas they are very gated behind one another. Like, you can have the skills to do potentially harder content earlier, but some of that is limited to, again, the gear that you have. Like, you can be performing well, you can know how to do your character's rotations, or you can do damage quote-unquote optimally for like what you have. But if you don't have the right drops, or if you don't have the right gear, then your damage is going to be slightly behind somebody else who simply got luckier and maybe isn't as masterful as you. Whereas something like Bayonetta, everybody is playing as Bayonetta, or Jean, or the other character. And the only real difference would be your playstyle, and the weapons that you use. And it's not necessarily, well, some weapons might be better in certain situations than others, but it's not like you can't play without those certain things. And the way that you do play, it facilitates a different type of playstyle. It's very player expressive. That's why I really like Devil May Cry, I like Bayonetta, I like character action games, because the power is very focused in the character in your tool set. There are times where like you're not going to have every tool out the gate. Devil May Cry 3 doesn't give you like Devil Trigger until what, chapter 5 or 6, I can't remember. But like you don't technically get access to all your full moves. Hell, during your first playthrough, most of these games aren't going to give you your full like moveset or like your abilities, because that's to encourage you to come back, because you're like, oh, I'm stronger now. Like, oh, I was able to do this thing that before I thought like was impossible. It's that gradual scale. You're getting better as the game goes on. You get to do self-imposed challenges, you get to work harder, you get to just get better at the game. And that in and of itself is a like mastery skill. Like, there's a very good example of this would be like knowledge games. Something like, I'm gonna keep messing it up, Outer Wilds. Something like Outer Wilds is a very knowledge-based game, where like, okay, you figure this thing out, and then once you figure it out, you figured it out. All the previous time that you spent learning that isn't wasted time, it's time that you spent to learn something and to figure it out, so that you now have that key piece of knowledge. Not much else changed outside of you having that knowledge, but having that knowledge is the progression. You are learning as you are progressing through the game. You're slowly getting better at it. You're mastering it. That's like I think I was watching something else where I was watching something else where the 100-hour rule came to mind, where like a lot of people tend to hear the it takes 1,000 hours to be an expert in something, like 1,000 hours to like deliberate practice. But there's another rule, not 1,000, it's like 10,000 hours. But there is another kind of statement that's kind of hidden in there, which is the 100-hour rule, which is, sure, it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at something, but you only need to put in 100 hours of deliberate practice to be better than 95% of people who ever do it, or whoever like even passingly show an interest in it. Like, again, my favorite chart, Dunning-Kruger. Like, you don't know what you don't know until after you know it. Like, it takes time. It takes deliberate time, practice, intent to like actually get good at something. It takes deliberate mastery. You don't necessarily adopt that mastery just by watching videos or taking other people's opinions. Like, you're taking the opinion of somebody who is supposedly a master, but maybe if you spent that 100 hours like learning how that character works in a fighting game, or learning how that boss fight works so that you know pixel perfect tricks so that you can get through it without like actually having to deal with anything, like, deliberate single player mastery, I feel, is something that has kind of been I don't want to say necessarily lost. Again, I use the example of like speedrunners. But I don't feel like it's as valued. Like, which is very funny considering that there's a lot more people like playing like very specific games more now. Whereas multiple people would say like, yeah, I like character action games, or like, oh, I play sports games. There's a growing number of people who are like, oh yeah, I play Genshin, or I feel like I'm constantly throwing Hoyo and gacha games under the bus. I say while I'm in the middle of grinding Grand Blue Arcarum. But like, a lot of people are playing fewer and fewer games. Or like, they're playing Fortnite, they're playing Roblox, or they're playing Call of Duty, and it's like becoming the one thing that they kind of do, but they're not necessarily practicing. They're not developing those mastery skills to deliberately get better at those games. They're kind of just playing them without really engaging with them. And I guess as a way to kind of try to wrap this back, I realized that I really enjoy that mastery process. I like deliberate practice. I like getting good at games that I care about. I find that very enjoying. I find it very fulfilling. And I don't think that scale for mastery really exists in a cozy game, because by its very nature, you can't really... I'm gonna use the word optimize, but that's not really the feeling I kind of want to elicit. Like, cozy and chill games are about not being very stressful, about not being very taxing. So that means that both the skill floor and skill ceiling are relatively low, because if, like, give enough players enough time, they'll optimize the fun out of anything. If you create too high of a skill ceiling in a type of chill and cozy game, then you kind of hit a very... I think the GDC talk I saw talking about it was like called a cursed problem, where it's just like there are two very competing factors in the game's design. For old people, an example of cursed design would be a lot of the talks that people had about ludonarrative dissonance, where Bioshock was very much about like, oh yeah, getting stronger, and like the decisions around the little sisters, and how that was kind of at odds with the narrative that the game is telling. That's a different type of curse problem. That is a narrative curse problem where the mechanics somewhat kind of were in contrast to what the story was trying to actually talk about. Can I officially call this a video essay now that I've used ludonarrative dissonance? Do I get to be in the cool club now? But point being, there is very specific limits that developing and making and playing a cozy game kind of entail. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, all games are developed within their limits, either by their own design, by the genre that they're in, or just simply by the technology of the time. But that coziness and that desire to have a very relaxing and stress-free environment doesn't necessarily foster that desire for mastery. Again, Bayonetta, Doom Eternal, like, those can be very stressful games on their higher difficulty settings, but that stress is what kind of pushes players to get better. It's like, oh, I'm really stressing doing this. There's a lot of things to kind of manage. There's a lot of things to keep track of. There's a lot of things for me to learn to make this easier on myself. And that's kind of where like the climbing games also became like a genre, where it is a lot of different, some of them have a lot of different things to factor, a lot of different things to pay attention to. Your stamina systems, the terrain, where you're going, what's the limit on your speed, like what are other things that are like coming up that you have to deal with, what are your resources that you're dealing with. It's a lot of factors that you actively have to engage with, but as a result, those different factors that do make the game more stressful create that higher level for mastery, because it shows how much better you can get by showing your ability to deal with, that's not the word I want to use, I want to use a better word, but that's the only one I can think of right now. It shows your ability to deal with those different limitations and those different expectations, and your mastery of being able to show, oh, I can not only manage these systems, but I can play in such a way that reduces how much they impact me while I am playing. Or they just outright become a non-factor. I think a very good example that I can think of, kind of that like helps serve, that would help kind of serve my point. Hang on, I just realized I've been talking and I need something to drink. One thing that would kind of like help me make my case, Minecraft. I don't like Minecraft. Ever since the hunger update, I really don't like it. Because hunger stops being a mechanic the moment that you start farming. And it's very counterintuitive. Like, why would you have hunger if just like making a basic farm basically causes that mechanic to stop existing? And then like, I don't know why hunger exists anymore. I don't know why it exists in the first place. Like, you make a farm, you have a bunch of bread, and like, that's it. You don't need a hunger system. The hunger system kind of exists to just be something that is occasionally maintained, but what is there to maintain when you're already so used to farming that like you just have an unlimited supply of bread? Like, that's kind of what one of my examples is. Like, there's no mastery over the hunger system. There is just, oh, there is a hunger system. This is what I do to deal with that. And now I don't deal with that. And I don't want to say that's necessarily my problem with cozy games, but like, that's just like a prime example of like, if there is no true level of mastery, if there's no tension is a very good word that I should have been using. If there's no tension between how these systems work, yeah, you do make your game more cozy, but at least to me, it kind of becomes less engaging. And it becomes less engaging because you can't really demonstrate mastery of it. Because like, oh, I understand how farming works in Minecraft, which means I'm a master of the hunger system. Even though all it did was take like, what, 2 hours for me to make a dirt house, find some seeds, make a hoe, make a bucket, and then bring it over to this plot of land. Like, it's not engaging, and I like games that are engaging. I think games are more interesting when like it's not a very passive experience, when you are in the middle of it and it is actively making you think. That's what makes them being interactive so interesting, to me. But that's kind of all that I have. I don't really I didn't really have like an end point, I guess. That's why these are just kind of notes where like it's me essentially trying to kind of go in circles, or at least dragging somebody else, unfortunately you, into hearing my seemingly incoherent ramblings about these different thoughts that are on my mind, because I like thinking about video games and I like playing video games and I want to make very interesting video games, hopefully. But in order to do that, I have to consider all these different things that both I do like and that I don't like, and then figure out why I don't like them, and figure out if it is either a me problem or it is something that maybe this one game didn't do right, but another game does incredibly well. But yeah, that's kind of all that I want to say, I guess. This is the first time I'm doing anything like this. In case the very rough presentation doesn't clue you in on that. But yeah, no, if this is something that like you might be more interested in like hearing like my stupid ramblings, you can I guess leave a comment and say like, oh yeah, I'd like to hear you talk about this, or like, what are your thoughts on this? I think a lot of people end up coming on YouTube and trying to have very poignant, direct type of answers for various different things. But no, sometimes these things don't have direct answers. Sometimes you just go wonderfully around and around in a circle with a very spirited return to the beginning. But maybe sometimes when you're going round and round, you figure out something that you didn't on your previous rotations. But yeah, if you want to talk about this, either leave a comment down below. You can follow me on Blue Sky or Twitch. I try to stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Usually starting around 7 p.m. EST. Yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning, noon, or night. So, yeah. Johnny.